Hello, it's Henry. So I'm back with Blue Review, and based on how I'm attired, I wouldn't blame you if you thought I was going to do a special on spaghetti westerns. That will come one day, I promise. Don't worry. Nor am I trying consciously to resemble the figure on the cover of the old exploitation movie, The Freak Maker, or that other one, The Evictors, has a similar guy, a similar kind of hat thing. Very 70s looking kind of thing. This is kind of the Great Silence kind of look I've got going on here. El Topo, whatever, but you know, you can't fuck with the design classics, let's be honest. So anyway, I am going to talk about a genre. I was going to do my usual 3 to 4 films that I've watched recently on various streaming platforms, but I'm going to wait a little longer, try to pick out the best of the ones I've seen or been watching or about to watch, or at least, you know, the most interesting, the ones that made the biggest impact on me, either positively or negatively. So, I am going to talk about a genre today, and it's one that I haven't really hemmed in on. I've done quite a few reviews of films in this genre. It was the first genre of anything I ever got into. Films, books, comic books, so I didn't really know it was exactly in that genre at the time. It even got me interested in a lot of rock bands, and that's science fiction. And yeah, before I was ever into horror, I was into science fiction. And then there became kind of a crossing over between genres, fusions of genres. You know, I was still a kid when Alien came out, and that was, of course, a huge hybrid of science fiction and horror. And it was based or inspired by earlier films like Planet of the Vampires, which also fused the two together. I really wish I had Planet of the Vampires on Blu-ray. It's probably my second favorite Mario Bava film, and it's really classic. But I don't, so I decided to return to my roots, so to speak, on this channel. However briefly, I'm only going to do 1 or 2 episodes like this, and then back to the current views for a while. They seem to be pretty well received, and you know, I'd like to kind of keep nourishing that audience, that nascent audience for them. But pardon me for the sidetrack. Back into films that are in my own personal Blu-ray library. So I've chosen 10 science fiction films that I haven't covered here before. I'm not going to cover all 10 today, okay? I'm not sure how many I'm going to cover, but I'm going to get started, and this is, you know, as the recent reviews of films I watched on Plex or Tubi or YouTube, etc. It's an informal little discourse. The only difference is I've seen these films a lot more, and so I know them a little more intimately. And I have the actual packaging here for them, so I can, you know, show them to you or read details off of them rather than doing that little Windows thing up there when I need to cheat. So I'm not gonna unveil the whole list, but I am gonna put it here for my own edification. And really, I'm just gonna kind of maybe, I don't know, randomly. Yeah, why not just randomly pick? Now I have reviewed some science fiction films on here. I really love like Annihilation, Anti-Birth, Liquid Sky, High Rise, which is only marginally a science fiction film by the dystopian twist and it being a J.G. Ballard story, and he's mainly known for science fiction. And a number of others. The Planet of the Apes film series, the original series from the 70s. So I'm going to go in here, and some of these are probably ones you might expect or hope for, and some maybe not. The first one is probably one nobody's going to be expecting or hoping for, unfortunately, but maybe you'll be interested in it after I talk about it. So this is called Immortal, a film by Enki Bilal. I think the full foreign name, original name was Immortal ad Vitam. So I guess that means immortal to life. I'm not sure exactly what that means. It's Latin, I get that. Anyway, so this says on the back it's New York City year 2095. A floating pyramid has emerged in the skies above Manhattan. Inhabited by ancient Egyptian gods, they have cast judgment down upon Horus, a falcon-headed god, one of their own. With only 7 days to preserve his immortality, he must find a human host body to inhabit and search for a mate. In the city below, a beautiful young woman, Jill, with blue hair, blue tears, and a power even unknown to her, wanders the city in search of her identity, aided by a doctor who is fascinated by this mystery of nature. Reality in this world has a whole new meaning, as bodies, voices, and memories converge with gods, mutants, mortals, and extraterrestrials. Stunning visual effects meld with the poetic surrealism of comic book creator Enki Bilal's fantastic, epic story, a groundbreaking step into the future of filmmaking. So yes, that's the back cover. It's got the sticker stain on it. I don't think there's anything exciting inside. No, not really. Just Jill and her blue tears. I'm going to pause this for 1 second because I want to show you something else. I have returned. So, large chunks of that film, Immortal, by Enki Bilal and directed by him, are taken from this book, Enki Bilal, the NIKOPOL Trilogy, which is a collection of various stories. I think some of these may have been printed in Heavy Metal Magazine originally. I could be wrong. And European albums, that's what they called graphic novels before they started doing graphic novels over here. They called them albums because of the way they looked, and I guess to give them more legitimacy, just like we did by calling them graphic novels. But anyway, NIKOPOL Trilogy, it's quite ambitious. The artwork is incredible. Bilal is definitely one of my favorite comic book artists, and his writing's not bad either. I'll just show you a few selected little bits here. So there you go. There's Jill with the blue hair, and his style reminds me a good bit of Mobius. They're contemporaries. That looks really good there. And I saw his art quite a bit when I was young in heavy metal, but of course I didn't know who he was then. I didn't have any concept. There are all kinds of different chapters and diversions, subplots that kind of fork off, but they're basically his depiction of this world, this future world that he's kind of come up with. So we get a lot of these kind of, post-apocalyptic vistas where you kind of have mixing of cultures, kind of like, seen in things like Blade Runner. And in America, that's kind of what America was founded on. So I guess, by the time of Blade Runner was 2019, we've already passed it. But by 2096, it's obviously in hyperdrive. Not only that, people are being genetically engineered. They're being genetically engineered to live longer and replace their parts with cybernetic parts or artificially generated fleshy parts. And then, of course, there's a rise of mutants, aberrants, on the genetic scale. Now, the movie, even same author, but he kind of takes off on his own set of tangents for the film. He zeroes in on a few things that interests him and a few characters, just a handful that he wants to bring out and illuminate in cinematic form. And I think he does a good job. I think they're both really good. The NIKOPOL trilogy comic book opus is kind of a little more heady, a little more cerebral, a little more detailed about all the minutia of this future world he's imagined, as I would expect from any imaginative comic book writer and creator, world builder, and that he certainly is a world builder. So, by boiling it down to its essences for the film, he's taken these elements that seem very incongruous, like the Egyptian gods and the 21st century mutants, and the people who are kind of partially fake, synthetic, and he illustrates that by having those characters be all CGI. And of course, in the comic, he draws everything, so all the characters look. There's a riot of looks, but the synthetic-ish humans in this look more like some of his more grotesque drawings in the comic, and he's chosen some of his more grotesque characters to create in that way, to realize in that way, and all CGI. And the CGI it's not 100% realistic, and I think that's very much on purpose. It adds a part of, it's like the movie slipping in between reality or a possible reality, and kind of on the edge of something more ethereal that you can't quite put your hands upon. And that's appropriate given the main characters. So the three main characters that he chooses to introduce us to in the film and focus on. There's NIKOPOL himself. So this is like an astronaut who was on this mission, and he had been kind of like a revolutionary, political revolutionary, and then considered like a martyr when he disappeared. And basically, he's in suspended animation in this tank in this ship, and by chance, I believe it is because of something accidentally set off by Horus, the falcon-headed god I mentioned from the back. NIKOPOL's pod leaves the rocket and falls to Earth. And he's okay. His leg is fucked up, but other than that, he's okay. And he awakens, and Horus finds him, and Horus is indeed the Horus of legend. And the other two gods I believe here are Bast, and I want to say yes, Anubis. Bast and Anubis, cat and dog, and they are kind of trying to hold Horus back. They see Horus as, I guess, an existential threat or a perpetual troublemaker through probably many centuries. And Horus in magic with a K, like Aleister Crowley, in his work and related works, Horus is viewed as the conquering child. In other words, you had the matriarchal era for 2,000 years, and that was Isis. And then, of course, Osiris dies. Osiris came back to life, And then for 2,000 years, since Osiris is rising, which coincides with Jesus' rising and also other sun gods of that period, that was the patriarchal period. And so now we're entering another age in the third millennium of the after Christ, but the fifth millennium of that whole cycle. And astrologically, that would be called the Age of Aquarius, which is why you had songs like "This is the dawning of the Age of Aquarius" back in the '60s, because that was perceived as coming. And then people in magical circles, like the Thelemites, referred to the Crowleans, Golden Dawn. They referred to it as the Age of Horus. So first you had the Mother Earth kind of thing. Then you had the ascendant father, who was stern and harsh, and then you had the conquering child, which means you had the child is an integrated being, and the Age of Aquarius or the Age of Horus will be an age of enlightenment. If only that happens. We're 20 years in, and I'm waiting. But particular to this story, Horus, I see him as, yes, being an ascendant god being for this age, and of course, this takes place, 75 years ahead of where we're at now. Much more than that from when it was actually written, I guess in the late 70s, early 80s. But Horus is not as benevolent as I tend to picture Horus from these mystical writings and mythology. He's very capricious, manipulative, and yes, his immortality is tantamount importance to him. Kind of maybe because his parents each only had an age of 2,000 years of ascendancy, that he's like, I want thousands and thousands of years. I'm only guessing here. He doesn't say that in the film or the comic book per se. So he decides, yes, he's going to inhabit a human host because he is tangible, and yet he's also a god, a spirit being too. Like he can slip in and out of intangibility, and the CGI for him is well done to represent that. Now he looks like a more solid, realistic being than the synthetic people I mentioned earlier, but he is. He's definitely doesn't look real, but he looks though he has solidity, weight to him, which a lot of CGI things, objects, people, whatever renderings lack that weight, which three-dimensional objects, real objects possess, which is a complaint that a lot of people have about CGI. But I think if this movie skirts those issues visually and incorporates them into the story, at least on a subtextual or a lower level. You may not think about it in these terms like I have, but I've watched this movie a zillion times, so I've analyzed the hell out of it. So our third main character is Jill. I think in the comic books her name is like Jill Bruskop. Heracles Nikopol is the full name of the character in the comic. They don't use his first name. Yeah, her name's something like Jill. It's Proskop or something. But anyway, they don't use her last name in the film. So she does look like these pictures, more or less. But to be honest, she's played by an actress named Jill Hardy, and she's really, to me, much more beautiful than the character in the comics. Not quite as haunting and waifish looking, but definitely still has that kind of otherworldly presence. Definitely doesn't fit in, doesn't belong. Jill is an enigmatic character. Definitely one of my favorite film heroines, really. I'm sorry, Linda Hardy. Linda Hardy's the name of it. actress, not Jill Hardy. And NIKOPOL is played by Thomas Kreschmann, who I enjoy in a lot of films. He's been in everything from Avengers: Age of Ultron to A Taxi Driver to Dracula 3D and Stendhal Syndrome by Argento and a zillion other German films. And, you know, he always turns up. Him turning up is always a welcome thing in my book, anyway. So he's really, really good in this. One of his most sympathetic and also weirdest roles. He brings the humanity to this character, and you know, he basically becomes enthralled to Horus, and their mission becomes to find a mate, and he's going to use NIKOPOL's body to impregnate her with the seed of Horus, ensuring his immortality. I guess he's probably intending to kind of be reborn into his own child. That's a trope used in various science fiction horror stories. So this is the trick. So how do you get Jill? So Jill is like very, she is very willful, and you know, rather strong-willed and very obstinate. And there's a scientist who wants to help her, played by Charlotte Rampling, who's really good in anything too. And you know, they're trying to figure out what Jill's like abilities are, or you know, what her exact genetic makeup is. I mean, she looks human, but like, yeah, she has the light blue skin, very light blue skin, and then the blue hair that is almost like almost like feathery, and kind of punk rockish, um, and yeah, she cries blue tears. Her lips are very blue, like they have blue lipstick, but that's how they naturally are. So you can probably see a little piece of her on the side over here, and uh, here's a little inset picture of her. So she has some kind of power, and you know, she has a mentor who she's been cut off from, who's kind of in this other dimension on the cusp of our reality that had been explored by, I guess, the humans or the technocrats of that era. And in that kind of weird realm is being called John, and he's from the comics too. And he wears all black, trench coat, everything, and a kind of scarf all over his head that's black. You can't see any of his features. He has a very distinctive voice, and uh, Jill loves him, and he loves her. It's hard to tell what exactly kind of love it is, but since neither of them are quite human, it's probably not quite a love that we would expect it to be. Not quite human love, but a passionate one, though maybe not sexually passionate, but mentally, emotionally passionate, and they kind of depend on each other. Their arcs kind of go in weird directions in the comics, and hers goes far away from his. But in the movie, she finally does have to say goodbye to him, and he just slips away into this realm ultimately. But you sense that John, like Jill, and like NIKOPOL, are all rebels against this future world where everything's kind of compartmentalized and synthesized and not quite. There's a humanity that's been drained out of humanity, and these technocrats kind of rule things. And you know, of course, everything's about money and power, and you know, on and on. And they have their schemes. They're kind of the secondary layer of characters, and most of them, like I said, are CGI because they are mostly synthetic beings physically within story, but also, you know, mentally they're not quite real people or real humans anymore either. So I think that's kind of the metaphor he's going for, but I could have just made that up. So you know, after a bunch of travails, Jill, you know, gains her freedom only to be kind of swept away by NIKOPOL. Um, and Nikopol doesn't want to like rape her, force himself on her with Horus inside him, and he starts to like her, and they have this kind of antagonism. Now she's like a virgin. I don't think she's ever had any physical sex, and I think like I said, her intimacy with John was more cerebral, emotional. But there's definitely this dynamism between them, the way they play it, and visually, she's such a striking character and so expressive, and honestly very sexy, but not in any kind of overt, like bombshell way. She's like a sylph. She's like an ethereal spirit of the air, but she's human. She's also kind of like a gutter punk, who's just kind of lost in this, sprawling technopolis. And um, Nikopol, of course, he's lost. Lost in time, lost in space and meaning. Just kidding. Rocky Horror reference. But yes, he's lost in time. I mean, it's a spin animation. And ideologically, he was out of step with things when he went up there, and now he's really out of step ideologically. And these technocrats want to destroy him, because he could be a martyr. He was a martyr, but now he's going to be like a reborn symbol for maybe some, that pesky thing called individual thought or free thinking, which, as we know, is the bane of all of these kind of monolithic organizations in science fiction, all the way from uh, the corporation and Soylent Green to the Empire in Star Wars, and on and on. The Cylons. There's very common theme, and it's kind of playing out in our world now. That's what's scary. So those cautionary sci-fi movies of the '70s, we didn't listen. So anyway, so this is that taken to its terminal point. There's not a world at war, but there's a world that's been completely like co-opted and transformed over into like the people who are they're almost like cyborgs. They've kind of like replaced enough organs to where they become completely synthetic or 99% synthetic, and there's some display of that. But that's kind of what's happened to society and humanity, is that bit by bit these artificial components, crafted by technology and bankrolled by money, big tech, they've kind of gradually replaced real humanity, culturally and physically. So people like Nikopol, he's out of step, and so is the Doctor, played by Charlotte Rampling. Hence, they're organic actors. Jill is a real person playing the role in makeup, but she's a mutant, so she's been a consequence of this world. I guess of the technology, whatever that made her the way she was, genetic engineering or some kind of experiments gone awry in a previous generation. Um, but anyway, she has some kind of telepathic mind kind of power, and I think John was maybe teaching her how to use it or hone it. But anyway, John's gone, and the technocrats try to kill him too, and he escapes, I think, forever into that abyss or that other dimension. He says goodbye to her, and it's sad. There's a lot of little emotions in this, a lot of delicate emotions and characterizations that, for some people, would just bring a movie like this to an absolute fucking standstill. But to me, I think he's got the rhythm perfectly laid out, because I'm engaged with that kind of stuff. So it still has that feeling like it's like some quirky indie drama about misfits. It just happens to take place in this, you know, uh, sci-fi, fantasia, and I don't have a problem with that. Well, I mean, it's a European movie, so I mean, they're going to have a little more uh, of those kind of off-kilter sensibilities. like indie movies do. And I do want to talk about an indie movie like that I haven't reviewed, and I do want to talk about a mainstream movie that has that same feel. I don't think I'm going to have time today to delve into them, but I've got them put aside. So, in any case, NIKOPOL and Jill do have sex. He does impregnate her, or Horus does through him. And then there comes a point where she doesn't remember him anymore. Even though they were falling in love with each other, definitely him, even more him with her, NIKOPOL, and fighting against Horus. Does Horus win out in the end? Yes and no. But in the very end, years passed and they're in Paris. She's just sitting in a chair and what have you, and NIKOPOL encounters her, and of course he recognizes her, but she does not recognize him, and it's really a nice exchange. There's the chemistry's already back, and then you glimpse her offspring, who then turns into a bird with blue wings. So, but it's kind of, and then the song they play at the end, I don't know the band. It's a really great kind of alternative rock song. It kicks in and it seems incongruous, but it's not. It's a perfect complement. It's like an upbeat ending, which the comic book does not have an upbeat ending. Its ending is kind of indeterminate, really. So if you're into the comic, don't expect this to be a faithful adaptation. It's just this guy created all this, and then in one medium, and then he's like, I'm going to do this in another medium. I want to use these characters in another medium, and these elements, the mating, the three-way, or whatever you want to call it, menage a trois, triangle, bizarre love triangle. And they're his characters, so let him do it. It's better he do it than Disney buy it and do their version. They're pretty good with the Marvel stuff, but you know what I mean. A corporation of writers by committee, and you know how I feel about that stuff. This is one guy's vision, and he's gotten lucky and popular and enough financing from Europe to do this project and to have this body of work behind him in the other medium, comics. So I really want everybody to see this movie. I mean, it's very breathtaking. The city looks beautiful. The pyramids. Some of the ships look to be constructed, and they're very cool. And the armaments and the costumes, but a lot of the stuff is CGI, and some of it is very convincing. Mainly the cityscapes and the pyramid and such, but some is kind of on the edge like the gods, and then some is kind of like blatantly fake, like the synthetic-ish characters I mentioned earlier. Some of that may put people off, or they may be confused. I'm trying to explain it so you'll have hopefully like not a thumbprint. What's the word? A blueprint? I don't know. In this case, really a blueprint. Some kind of way to navigate through it and go, oh, okay, that's kind of that, and that doesn't bother me. But I think you'd have to have adventurous sensibilities to like this movie anyway. But even people with adventurous cinematic sensibilities, and sometimes especially them, react viscerally against, bad CGI, and I do too sometimes. I'm not going to lie. It can take me out of the film. But I think in this case, it's in the film, not to take you out of the film. It's to add an element to the film, and it's the humanity of the main characters that is what keeps you in the film. So anyway, this one is just one that's been perpetually obscure since it came out. I mean, every few years someone will talk about it. I was happy it came out on Blu-ray, and I got it used at my last job for like, I don't know, $7 or $8, and it's beautiful. And I sold my DVD. So it has a proud place in my library. So due to a variety of circumstances, uh, the night is looming. The evening is ahead. I have some things I have to do before returning to the day job tomorrow morning. And I've gone 35 minutes thus far. So I don't see any point in really making this an epic length. I just really wanted to check in, do an episode, and try something different, talk about some of these genre movies that I have. So on next episode, probably, I can't promise, I'm capricious, will be another science fiction themed episode, and I'll try to do at least 2 movies, maybe even 3. Maybe this will be an hour. The next one will be an hour length. We'll see. I want to see how this one does, and what people think, and if this interests anyone. I think some of the movies that I'm going to be doing are going to be more familiar or more maybe well regarded than Immortal, but I deliberately started with Immortal because it was one of the more obscure and underappreciated ones in this batch that I pulled. So anyway, I'll be back soon, and I guess I'll have a spaghetti western special several months from now, and dress kind of like El Topo again. So until then, I love you guys, and I really appreciate you watching. I appreciate the patrons of the channel, and please thumbs up, please subscribe, and please share. So